Today we're going to dig a little bit deeper into the command line, focusing on some useful commands that you'll use in your day-to-day development, and specifically we'll look at how to work with files and to search files. Our goals for today are to learn how to work with files and directories on a Unix command line, and that includes the life cycle of a file, so creating, moving, renaming, removing, understanding the permissions for files and directories. We're going to install some new tools, and then we're going to actually learn how to search files based on name and also the contents of the files. Some of the tools we're going to use in this tutorial can be a little bit different depending on the type of system you're on. So for the sake of that, I'm going to run this entire tutorial inside of a Docker container. So I'm going to do docker run -rm-it-w just to set my working directory and set that to usr src. And then we're going to use Ubuntu, and then we'll use the version of 1604. You likely don't have this on your machine, so this will download this when you start, and then we'll run bash. To start off, we'll talk about how you can create files. And normally, if you were working on your Windows or Mac or Linux desktop machine, you would create a file by maybe right-clicking, create new, or opening up your text editor and creating a new file that way. And then when you save it, it would write it to disk. There are other ways to do that. And if you're just in a command line and you want to create a file, what you can do is you can use the command touch. So we're going to touch example.txt. And then just to see what it is, we'll do ls-al. I want to break down this line for the example.txt, especially this part right here. So this is the permissions section of the line. And this first dash is for whether or not it's a directory or a file. As you can see up here, ... is the directory that we're currently in. So it is a directory. But this is a file, so it's not. And then these next sections are in groups of 3, and they stand for read, write, and execute, which is what this X stands for. And then their groups here are for different levels of user. So the first section here is for the owner itself, which in this case is root, which is the user that we are. The next section is for the group that owns this, which is also root, which the root user is in the root group, and the root group owns this. And then this last segment is the permissions for any user on the machine. These permissions are important because they are how we control who can and cannot access a file, or if it's a binary or executable, who can run the file. So in this case, the only person who can actually modify this file is the root user themselves, but everybody else can read it. It's not uncommon to need to change permissions, the groups, or the owner of a file, and for that there are a few tools that exist. Specifically, there's chmod, which is chmodify, and this is for modifying permissions. There's chown, which is for modifying ownership. And then there's chgrp for changing the group. And I'm not going to cover these right now. You can actually look at the man page for each of these things if you want to know how you would change these. But just know that they do exist. And so ch and then some suffix there will get you what you need to change the various attributes on this particular line right here. Moving past the file and its permissions, let's look into how we can work with directories too. So you've maybe seen me use this one before, but that's Mkdir. And so I call it Mkdir. Anytime you hear me refer to Mkdir, this is what I mean. And we're going to use this with a flag P, and then we're going to create a test and examples directory. So what this does is you'll see that we now have this test line here, or I guess if we do an AL, you can see that we have a directory called test, and then inside of test, we have another directory called examples. So one of the things we want to be able to do with our file is we wanted to be able to move it around. And there are a few different ways you can move files effectively inside of a Unix command line. One of them is by copying the file, and this leaves the file in place where it's currently at and then also creates a copy of it somewhere else. So if we copy example.txt into test examples, and then we ls test examples, you'll see that we now have a duplicate example.txt inside of that directory as well. The other way to move a file or directory in the Unix command line is by using the mv tool, which is just move. And this moves it entirely, so it won't exist in the same position where it was. It'll just go to where you tell it to go. So for this one, we will move test examples example.txt to just be in the test directory as sample.txt. So if we look again at test examples, you should see there's nothing there. And then if we look inside of test, we have an examples directory and the sample.txt. So what we did there is kind of twofold. We completely moved where the file was and we changed its name. If we would have just written this line as test examples, example.txt, and then test / like this, it would have moved it, but it would have kept its original name. Next up, we'll take a look at how you would remove a file. So for removing, you have the rm tool, which is remove, and we can remove test sample.txt, and that works just fine. It's a single file. But if we try to remove test, it'll tell us the test is a directory, and so it cannot be removed. That's a little bit false, because the rm tool is actually the tool that we're going to use to remove directories. You just need to use the right flag for it. So if we man rm, there's no man, so if we rm help, and we scroll up here, you can see that there's this this -r, and so this is for removing directories and their contents recursively. And this is the most common flag that you'll use. You'll also use this f flag kind of frequently if you want to remove a directory that's not empty. Just going on here, if we want to remove test, it'll also remove the examples directory, so we'll use rm-r test. And now if we look, we're back to just having an example.txt. That about does it for the life cycle of a file. You can create a file with touch. You can move a file with either using CP or the MV tools, where MV will actually physically move the file and CP will duplicate the file. Either of those can be used to rename the file in its new direction. You can remove a file and directories using rm. You just have to make sure to use the right flag, and you can make a directory using mkdir. Next thing we're going to talk about is how to search files. For this, we actually need something with a little bit of substance. So what we're going to do is we're going to first, on this new Ubuntu image, we're going to install wget so that we can download something from the internet easily. And then from there, we're going to search through some files in a Rails application. Depending on the operating system you're running, the command that we're about to run is going to be wildly different. This command is very specific to a Debian-based system like Ubuntu or Debian itself. So we're going to run apt-get update yqq, and what this does is it updates our machine with the known repositories that it can go and pull software from. Then we're going to say and, which this is how we tie two commands together. And then we're going to run apt-get install yqq wget. And these -yqqs just say, yes, I want you to install the things. Otherwise, it'll prompt us for it. And the QQ just says to quiet the output, so there's not as much being printed to the screen. This can take a little while depending on your internet speed and how long it takes to update the cache locally. All right, now we have wget, and what we're actually going to do is we're going to go grab the Rails application that we used in our Dockerizing a Rails application tutorial. So we're going to use wget https://github.com de facto software hours archive development.zip. So if we look now, we have a development.zip file. And what we want to do here is we want to unpack this zip file and turn it into a directory. In order for us to read this development archive, we need to actually install another tool. So we can use apt-get install unzip. Now, if we unzip development.zip, it will unpack everything into an hours-development directory for us. And that's where we're going to do most of our work now. The first thing that we're going to cover is how to actually search files based on the name of the file, which this can be handy if you're exploring a new code base and you're kind of expecting some configuration to fall into a certain category, and you know that more than likely a file name is going to contain a certain word. So a good example of this is the word secret. So let me break down what we're doing here. So we're using the tool named find. We're saying find from our current directory using the name. And then this right here is the actual thing we're looking for. These asterisks here, these stand for a wildcard. So that means any character, any group of characters, so just anything in the file name, including secret at some point, and then anything after secret also. So if we do that, it finds us this secret-token RB file. That's pretty handy. You can be much more specific with this if you want to, though. So we could say, give me anything with the word tag in it. And this should give us more. So this gives us a coffee file. It gives us some SCSS files, gives us some RB. So if we say, oh, just give me things that include tag and also include coffee, then this will only return us these two files that have the tag stuff in it. So that's one way that you would use this, and this won't be the most common searching that you do, but it is good to know how to search by file name. It's especially useful if you need to get a list of file names and then rename some files. This can be pretty handy for that too. The more common type of searching that you're going to do is going to be searching for the file contents. So the tool that most people use starting out for that is going to be grep. This is on most systems by default. It's already pre-installed on this particular distro. And then we're going to use a couple flags here. -R is for recursive. Just means search all the directories underneath where I'm at, or well, underneath the directory that we tell it. The N flag is saying, giving the line numbers, and that's just so that when you go and open up a file in your text editor, you know exactly what line to get to see the contents that you're going for. So we're going to search for tag in all of these directories. And this gives us a lot of output, and we'll just go through this. So this gives you the file name, gives you the line number, and then this is the exact content of the line. So there's a bunch of white space here because it's YAML, and then it found it right here. So it highlights where exactly it found it. And we're not looking for things inside of YAML files. We only want things inside of Ruby files, and specifically we want anytime we call this particular class right here. So the way we can be a little bit more explicit about that is by using a more specific search. So we have to put a slash before this dot here, and just to say that it's not a wildcard character in the search language that you'll use for using grep, which is regular expression for the most part. Dot does mean a single wildcard character, so keep that in mind. So if we search again, we don't get those YAML instances, and every single time we do get it, it's us actually using this class and calling some method on it. That's about it for the basics of working with files and directories in a Unix system. This is probably going to be the last tutorial I do over command line. This gives you enough to be confident in moving around in the command line and interacting with files and directories in the various projects that you're going to work with. Throughout later tutorials and previous tutorials, actually, we're going to gradually cover more and more command line tools as we need them in whatever it is that we're trying to build. But for right now, this should be enough to let you get in there and not be afraid to use command line. I hope you liked the video. Let me know what you think in the comments on YouTube, or leave a comment on Facebook, or tweet at me. But let me know what you want to hear about. We're actually just closing out the survey about our next topic, which is going to be Ruby on Rails. So I'm very excited to talk about that. But yeah, let me know how this was, and if this is helping you with using your command line.